information on prevention, tools for a healthy lifestyle. Make little changes to be the best you. It's all here. A podcast empowering, informing, and motivating Bermuda to live well. Bermuda Health-Abets. Everything from A to Z on healthy living. Brought to you by the Health Promotion and Wellness Office of the Department of Health in collaboration with local health partners.
Welcome to an episode of Bermuda Health-Abets. This is a podcast where we discuss everything from A to Z on healthy living, with the mission of empowering, informing, and motivating Bermuda's residents. Hi, I'm Marie Beach, your host today. I've worked for 20 years as the Healthy Schools Coordinator for the Department of Health. I work closely with schools, the Department of Education, other government departments, and most community health partners that have programs and activities in schools. Our topic today is enjoying food with diabetes, understanding food labels, and our guest is Sarah Bush-Denoya. Sarah is a registered dietitian and the head of diabetes education at the Bermuda Diabetes Association. Good morning, Sarah, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Can you tell our listeners a bit about yourself and your role at the Bermuda Diabetes Association?
Absolutely. I'd love to. I am a registered dietitian. My first clinical qualification came back to Bermuda 30 years ago, and have had the privilege and pleasure of working really in understanding, Marie, when I first came back to the hospital in Bermuda and King Edward as a registered dietitian, the value of education and support, and particularly for people living with diabetes. I'm meeting young children with type 1 diabetes and their families, women with gestational diabetes, and where really the impact of nutrition and of lifestyle makes such a difference in management of a chronic condition like diabetes. So I've done courses, and we've done over the last few decades, qualifications and training, which has led me to where I am today. And I've met some incredible people, had some amazing experiences, seen an awful lot develop with diabetes technology, which really all helps to make people much more on the front foot with being able to manage a condition like diabetes well. But it all goes back to what we put in our mouth. And at the Bermuda Diabetes Association, where we are now in our own purpose-built, fully comprehensive education and pharmacy facility just around the corner, we are able to offer a lot more programs, as well as medical nutritional diabetes counseling, and we have a full-service pharmacy. So we've really come on a lot, but with our emphasis has never changed and wavered really from being able to educate and support and help people in Bermuda living with diabetes live their best lives.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Should everyone with diabetes know how to read a food label, or is label reading just for people who need to take insulin to manage their diabetes?
No, I think the misconception is what I really wanted to people to understand here is that whether you have diabetes in your family, whether you're aware that you may be at risk of diabetes, whether you have pre-diabetes, have been told by your doctor that you have impaired glucose tolerance or just early stages, if you have type 2 diabetes, if you have type 1 diabetes, obviously if you've been told that you have gestational diabetes in pregnancy, all of that for anybody, really understanding and getting education and information on what you're looking for on reading a label to make the best food choices possible is critical. Probably, what we've seen lately in the advancement of glucose sensors and diabetes technology, one thing I'm excited and proud in Bermuda is that we have access for people with pre-diabetes with insurance to wear a device called a glucose sensor. And even without a diagnosis of diabetes, and you're not on any medication, if I give someone, we train someone to use a glucose monitor, and they can see the immediate impact of what they eat. So if I eat this amount at breakfast time and it makes my sugars go up this much, if I modify my diet and make a different choice for breakfast and I don't get the same spike in my glucose level, I can prevent perhaps the development of type 2 diabetes. Mm-hmm. So in all aspects of a diabetes spectrum, whether it's pre-diabetes, type 2 diabetes, understanding food labels, understanding your glucose patterns, and then modifying and maybe choosing different food products can be of huge value.
So, in other words, it is very essential that people with diabetes, and even those who may be learn how to read food labels as a means of preventing?
It's a huge tool, and it's, it helps people. People go into the grocery store, and I think it can be a zone of bewilderment. And we, thank you for the topic this morning. I want to really grab onto, because if you pick up a food label in a grocery store and you get the wrong information from it, or you focus on the wrong things, it may not be helpful. But focusing on the right things and making sure that, this is where a lot of people, they pick up a label and they become overwhelmed. And I was at a conference in Barbados a few years ago, where we were looking at strategies to improve health in the Caribbean, and actually particularly preventing childhood obesity. And there was a fantastic presenter that said the average person picks up a label and has 1.8 seconds, not even 2 seconds, to look at it and glance at it and see whether it goes into their grocery basket or not. So we have to make nutrition label reading quick and impactful. And in fact, at this point, and I think we haven't seen it in Bermuda, in some products we do, putting labels on the front of package. So if you have a front of package symbol that highlights whether that food is a good choice or not to put in there, because if you've got a screaming toddler in your grocery in your grocery cart, then you're just throwing things in there. But I mean, so we want to make sure that when I tell people to pick up a box and look at the side panel on the nutrition panel, they know straight away what they're zoning in for and whether that food is going to make it into their grocery basket or not.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the manufacturers are not putting that information on labels consistently for any particular reason?
What do you mean, the front of package or the?
The ingredients on the front, and I'm even thinking if it said, you see some things that say gluten-free.
Yeah.
Sugar-free.
Well, the front of the package is where they're trying to grab you. So I also tell people be very wary of what's on the front of the package, because they're marketing a product and they want to sell you something. And, one of the biggest myths, and where I tell people with diabetes, is looking at something that says it's sugar-free. They want that to jump into your basket right away. But it is not necessarily going to be a product that has no impact on your blood glucose levels if it has sugar alcohols in it or is full of carbohydrates. So remember that what's grabbing you in a big bold statement on the front of that package may not actually be what you want to look at. And you want to pick up that nutrition, the side panel, and look at what coming to us from the US and legislated in most countries now, Canada and the UK also, is a standardized nutrition label in which you want to look at what is important on that label.
Wow. So what is the most important item to look for first on the nutrition label of a food or beverage?
Love this question, because we can be talking to a lot of people and they think, oh, that would be sugar or that would be calories, but it actually isn't. The first thing you want to look at when you pick up a beverage or a box of cereal or anything, a box of crackers, is you need to look for the serving size. So for example, what I'm now about to read after I read the serving size will be the nutrition information per that serving. And is that the serving that I'm going to consume? So if I'm interested in the amount of carbohydrate or the amount of protein or the amount of, it's going to be in that serving size that they have indicated on the box. And I might be intending to eat double that, or I might be and they might again be sort of selling it to you as a myth. How many people pick up a bottle of a drink, a 20-ounce bottle of a beverage, and you're going to walk down the street or walk to your car and drink that whole bottle, but you actually look at it and it says it's 2.5 servings, and that's absolutely not relevant or reality. People buy that and they're going to drink the whole bottle. So if you think that it says it's got 30 grams of sugar in it, when actually it's got 2.5 servings in it, you're going to be drinking 75 grams of sugar. So the serving size, as what the rest of the product information is going to be led by, is the most important thing to look for. Then you can make a decision: is it that serving size is that many carbohydrates or sugar for 6 crackers? Am I going to eat 6? And if that amount seems too high, maybe I'll cut that in half and eat 3 crackers. So start with looking at the serving size.
Wow, very important information. So let's say I come and look at a label. Am I looking for the sugar content per serving or the carbohydrate content per serving, and are they the same?
Absolutely vital piece of information here, and I'm going to just park this here, because if we get one thing from our information today, it is that it is the carbohydrate that's most important, and many people focus specifically on the sugar. And this in decades now of having the privilege of working with people and looking at label reading and educating people pick up something with diabetes and they're automatically looking at the sugar content of it. Well, if we pick up a box of brown rice or jasmine rice, it may have no sugar in it, but it's going to have a tremendous amount of carbohydrate.
So they're not the same.
It's not the same. So sugar, if we understand one huge fact, and I would want anybody to sort of write it on a piece of paper and put it on your fridge, all carbohydrates turn to sugar. So whether we have a bowl of brown rice or we have a bowl of sherbet or a bowl of cereal, all of that carbohydrate, if it's coming from starch or if it's coming from simple sugars, will wind up as glucose. So for somebody with diabetes or looking to prevent increases in their glucose or blood sugar levels after they eat, any amount of carbohydrate will get converted into glucose, and the total amount of it will affect the total amount of glucose in your body after you eat it. So people get very hung up on choosing a food which has minimal amounts of sugar in it, but is still a huge amount of carbohydrate. And if you understand the concept that all carbohydrate turns to glucose, then listed under that in bold on a nutrition label will be in dark total carbohydrate. Underneath of that, what kinds of carbohydrate are in that product. There's going to be dietary fiber in that. There's going to be sugar in that. And there's going to be added sugars. Now the new labeling has mandated that we put added sugars in there, because some things are going to have natural sugars. If you pick up a can of peaches or you pick up something that's going to be what's naturally in the product. But I really want people to understand, if you want to know the potential effect that product has on raising your sugar levels, you have to understand how much carbohydrate is in it, not just check purely the sugar content in that.
Wow. Yeah, that is a vital piece of information. So far, everything you've said is really important.
And sugar is important. Don't get me wrong. Obviously,
yes.
And it's going to follow suit in most cases that the higher the sugar content is in that food product, the higher the carbohydrates likely to be.
Yes.
So if you're and it's some people make comparisons of things. That, for example, did you know that there's sugar added to tomato sauce like ragu or Prego or some of those tomato sauces? So I would tell a person to look for, if you had 4 jars in front of you at the grocery store, look for the jar that has the least amount of sugar in it. And that's probably going to be the one with the least amount of carbohydrate in it as well. Yes. And people say, but that takes a lot of time. And I say, right. But then after you've made that decision on your tomato sauces then you're going to just grab that bottle each time. Yeah. So label reading is it is an investment in your time. It's a valuable investment in your time. Mm-hmm. But I want to tell people that when you do it, and at the beginning people say, my first trip to the grocery store, after I had a nutrition a counseling session with you, or diabetes counseling session with you, took me 2 hours, but then the next time was 1.5, and then it was 1 hour and 2, because now I know what I'm grabbing based on it. So as with everything, the first time we learn something, I think of the first time I've learned a few things, it takes you a while in the beginning, and then you'll start to know what those products are. You'll start to look at yogurt labels, and you'll start to look at the sauces, and you'll think that's the one that I'm choosing, and that's the one based on what I compared before. Mm-hmm. So don't go the first time that you're planning to do this with any time constraint or on a Wednesday when the shops are busy.
I well remember a grocery tour you took us on some years ago, and I learned so much from you, and I still practice.
I remember in the salad dressing aisles and all kinds of things, but it is. And I mean, you can learn something from picking up any bottle of anything. But I think start with, as I said, we're going to go through this little episode today and start with your what's the serving size? And then I'm going to hone down on the percentage values, which are on the right-hand side of a product. Don't worry about that. We're going to go straight into the nutrients and look at each nutrient and how much of each of the nutrients is in there.
So having said that, what information about other nutrients might be important for someone with diabetes to look for on the label?
Right, so that's a good, so we're going to start, and I'm going to be a little bit biased, I'm going to start with the carbohydrate, because the first thing most people with diabetes is, if I eat 6 crackers, if I eat this portion of this food product, the indication on the serving size has said, how many grams of carbohydrate am I going to get in this serving? Because And because hopefully if you've met with a registered dietitian or you've got some idea of how many grams of carbohydrate should I be having at each meal, and that's very individual for one person. But if a product that you eat is going to have 30 grams of carbohydrate in that serving, it's going to have less of an impact than something that has 60 grams of carbohydrate. So the more carbohydrate you consume at each meal, the more glucose is available afterwards. And either your body knows how to process that well or it doesn't know how to process that well. So we are looking to have a fair, I really want people to be mindful and aware of how many grams of carbohydrate they're having at each meal. I might give them carbohydrate goals. I might give them protein goals. I might give them fat goals as well. So, but we really start the conversation with carbohydrate goals because it will have the most impact on your glucose levels after you eat. But not just purely looking at the amount of carbohydrate that you eat. It's really important, as you know, we've learned as we've all grown up, that balance and moderation is important. So we have to look at the balance of other nutrients on the plate. And it's vital. And what we've learned with looking at people's continuous glucose monitoring patterns when they wear diabetes technology is you can have 30 grams of carbohydrate and it might impact your glucose in that way. But if I eat some protein and fiber with it, it's going to impact my glucose in a wholly different way and maybe a more positive way. So we've got to understand the importance and the contribution of protein and fiber and healthy fat in adding to that food choice. So when I tell people, for example, looking for a product, also look at a moderate amount of carbohydrate, make sure it's on the lower side of the amount of carbohydrate, but look for that. If you had 4 choices of that product, choose the one which has more protein per serving, more dietary fiber per serving, and look at the healthy fat. So of that carbohydrate food, make sure that some of that is dietary fiber. And in actual fact, the more fiber that's in that product, that fiber isn't going to turn into glucose. It's not. It's part of the total carbohydrate listed underneath it, but it's not going to turn into sugar. It's roughage. We use that. And the fiber will slow down the absorption of that, as will the amount of protein. So if you're choosing a protein bar or you're choosing a granola bar, if you're choosing one that has more fiber per serving, more protein per serving, protein and fiber will both slow down the gastric emptying of that food from my stomach, meaning it's delivered into the small intestine as glucose in a slower fashion. And that's what we want, a more gradual rise in our glucose after we eat.
Wow. And that made me think of the 5 food groups that we've all overlearned through our lives.
Go back to basics. Maybe don't complicated things. And, you know, when we talked about, you know, how many years have we collaborated in the food model in a healthy food plate. Look at our Eat Well plate. And because it's got, if you just don't want to have a plate full of pasta, you want some protein there. You want some vegetables, some non-starchy vegetables. Because when we take all of those food groups, and this is what we learned, certainly I learned, you know, from our grandparents, and it was all about balance and protein. And so you had fruit and you had, which produced fiber, and you had non-starchy vegetables, and you have your protein, whether it's plant-based protein or animal-based protein, and you have your carbohydrate. And it's all there because each one of those nutrients is providing a valuable role in the diet, and they each kind of combine with each other. And then we've all seen the food fads where I can't eat this food with that food, and I can't eat that nutrient at that. And I've looked at that over the years, and I thought, we're missing the point. This is how we've eaten all along, and each of those nutrients, and particularly in combination with each other, help each other in the way that our body's been designed to function.
Yeah. And again, I'm thinking of like eating for your blood type and all of that. That was, I tried reading about it. I never tried to do it. Because too many of the foods I enjoyed, like to make, like even the vegetables, I couldn't have with my blood type.
People try, you know, and again, I totally have empathy for people in that everybody wants to try something that they think, you know, and I think that we keep saying as registered dietitians, where, you know, as kind of the nutrition we've done for 4 years or a master's degree in learning about, because nutrition is a science, and science evolves and science changes, but many people have an opinion about food or nutrition. And they put that out, and or something that's a little perhaps not evidence-based or something, and people are really, you know, we're willing to do all sorts for our health, and we're also willing, unfortunately, and I'll say it here, we can move on quickly from it, we're looking for the easy way out or the shortcut. We're looking for something that really, it can't be as simple as just putting half of my plate vegetables, half of my plate, quarter of my plate is carbohydrate, and a quarter of my plate is protein. But then when I pick up that food label, so how can I match that same, align that, and make that healthy choice at the grocery store? Because you're winning really when you're bringing those foods home, the correct foods foods home in your grocery basket to put together those healthy meals. And it really can be a lot more simpler than people make it in our minds. So if I try this, or if I try that new diet, or if I try this way of eating, but let's not lose the fact that many of what we'll go back to as registered dietitians, we're going back to basics with this. But we have to read labels, because what's also happened in the last couple of decades is we're eating far, far more foods that do unfortunately come with labels on them. So I think really learning the skills of how to read labels has become vital and incredibly important for people who are trying to manage blood sugar levels after they eat with diabetes.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sarah. I'm just sort of thinking, as a layperson and a person that's been around you for two decades plus.
Longer than
and
that.
learning about your craft and, how we can improve our health through healthier eating. And I'm thinking, and you can correct me if I'm not correct, that the Eat Well plate, which is a portion control plate, might be a complement to food labeling.
It really is. It really is. It's understanding that we're looking for, if you look at the concept of the Eat Well Bermuda plate, which people can have in their mind, if you think about looking at a plate now and you draw a line down the middle of it, we want half that plate to be non-starchy vegetables, so our broccoli, our cauliflower, some carrots, some string beans, and then you want a quarter of that plate to be maybe a small piece of fish or salmon, and then a quarter of that plate be a small baked sweet potato or something. So that's a lower proportion, a quarter of that, 25% or less of that being carbohydrate, a good amount, 25% of that, 20% protein, and then 50% of that being fiber and all of the other nutrients, the multivitamins and minerals and roughage and energy. There's a certain amount of carbohydrate, small amounts in vegetables. So if you're picking up a label and we're looking for a food on that label, for the most part, making a healthy choice for someone with diabetes, it's going to be moderate, it's going to be lower in carbohydrate, it's going to be higher in fiber, and it's going to have a good source of protein there, and it's going to be lower in fat. So, but the first thing you're looking for is, is understanding what part of that might be relevant to you. And an Eat Well plate is a good general way to start. When I sit down with somebody with diabetes, we will need to understand, and I help them with what medications they're taking, how specific we might need to be with protein, with carbohydrates based on, blood work and blood parameters. We look at kidney function, we look at blood pressure, we look at all of those issues to really make a very individual prescription. But an Eat Well plate, the concept of that is a really good place for people to start, and then to take that concept of what we're looking for in terms of lower carbohydrate, a good protein source, and a moderate or lower amount of healthy fats right into the grocery store when we're looking at labels.
I love that. So the labels would be on sort of processed foods.
And what we're trying to do, obviously, saving that to my last question there, but what we're trying to do is exactly choose more things. But that's why we do need the skills to look at those labels and find out. But if we're picking up something, that doesn't have a label, we'll talk about that in a moment.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. So what can we learn about the item from reading the ingredient list on a label?
So what we've just been talking about here is what we call the nutrition label, which is where the nutrients, the total carbohydrate, the dietary fiber, the amount of protein, and the amount of fat is on the label. And then further underneath that box, you'll find an ingredient list. And what I want people to understand about the ingredient list is that's going to be the list of which the items will appear by weight in the order of which they are concentrated in that product. So the first three ingredients in that ingredient list are going to be the things that are there in the most proportion. Okay. So if we see sugar in the first three ingredients, it's sugar, high fructose corn syrup, glucose, malt, whatever ending in OSE is a sugar. So we know that predominantly there's a lot. If you look at it, pick up a yogurt and you think that's a healthy yogurt, and you wonder, why is the grams of carbohydrate so high in this yogurt and sugar? And I look, and the second ingredient is low-fat milk and sugar. That's right there. The sugar is the second ingredient in it. Yeah. And also, as we talked about in the beginning, the idea of them trying to sell you a product. I'm not targeting out a vitamin water or a vitamin drink or a vitamin product, but it might say, this product has, B6 or energy or this, and you pick up the ingredient list and you look at B6, niacin, the vitamins, and they're at the bottom of that list. There's 20 items in front of that vitamin, and it's at the end, but that's been what they've put front and center on that label. So you're buying that because you want that ginkgo, that whatever the nutrient is, but actually that's on the last ingredient on that list. The first ingredient is filtered water or high fructose corn syrup, and you're thinking, no, that actually isn't a lot in there. So look at the ingredient list to see really where the telling amount of that product is, and what the majority of, and if you see sugar in the first 3 ingredients in it, then you know that it's likely to be, and it's probably, and you'll have already maybe deduced that from seeing that it's high in carbohydrates.
And when you eat it, it'll be sweet. And then the ingredients at the end of the ingredient
that you bought the
list,
product for are irrelevant.
Yes.
Almost
And they're
irrelevant.
last.
But legally they were allowed to put that on that label because it's there. But I saw that it's the 26th ingredient and it's the bottom of that list.
Yes.
So it almost becomes irrelevant. It just becomes
like
a selling
tricks.
tool.
Tricks.
It's marketing, and much respect for my marketing
Yes.
friends. But it's successful if they've made you put that in your, and then you think, gosh, why did my sugar, somebody's carrot juice or this drink or this thing, and you look at it and the carrots are at the bottom and the first ingredient is something else.
It's confusing. Wow. Do calories matter? Should people with diabetes be counting calories?
So, and that's just a little point I want to spend 2 seconds on. We've the first thing we're going to go into that label, and the first thing we're going in for is looking at the serving size. Then we're going to look at the carbohydrates, and then of those carbohydrates, how much is added sugar. A lot of people have spent their lives, women particularly, reading the calories on that product. And I want to say 2 things. Yes, calories matter. Absolutely. And in terms of what I want to say is that what we know about being successful with reversing type 2 diabetes or stopping prediabetes from becoming type 2 diabetes is that a lot of that is driven by weight. And if we can, not everybody, and I want to make this really clear, not everybody who's overweight will get diabetes or develop type 2 diabetes. But for everyone who develops diabetes, losing weight will help, because it starts to get some of that fat out of your liver and your organs and your pancreas, and it makes your body more insulin sensitive. So losing weight is always going to be of huge benefit in most people. But that's also what I look at when I'm counseling someone, and we set goals for that, healthy weight goals. So if someone were to just simply go ahead and count carbohydrates and look at protein, but be oblivious to the calories that they were eating, then you still may struggle, perhaps, with your glucose. So calories are still important. As myself personally, I think it's very difficult for people to count calories. I don't think, our tongue has a calculator on it. Our tongue ain't got AI or chat GPT on it. If we could come up at the end of the day with exactly how many calories we're eating, it takes the pleasure out of eating if you're counting calories to the last number. But I do want people to be aware, again, by comparison, if you're comparing 2 or 3 products and that product meets the other products for, a moderate amount of carbohydrates, and looking at good protein and looking at fiber, and if it's got the lower calorie option too, it is still important to be mindful of how many calories you're taking in, because being in a calorie deficit will go far to creating and helping you on your journey to lose weight. And we can do calorie deficits, obviously, by increasing our energy expenditure as well as reducing what we intake. But in terms of, I don't want people to think that it doesn't matter, but I don't want it to be the primary focus. That, where people get, that becomes the only thing they look for on that label. Mm-hmm. Look at it in combination and in conjunction with everything else we're looking at.
So it's sort of combining the label reading knowledge with making better choices when you're in the aisles of the grocery store, combining that with a healthy lifestyle.
Exactly. And thinking to yourself, calories, of course, calories matter, because if I said to myself, almonds are a healthy source of vitamin E, almonds are a healthy source of fats, they're lower in carbohydrates than peanuts or cashews. But if I took a 2-pound bag of almonds back home and I ate the whole package of almonds, and then I went to check my weight at the end of that week after my Sunday walk, oh, you know what? I had that whole bag of almonds on the couch. So unfortunately, quantity, portions, calories, they still matter. And I don't want to make this overcomplicated for people, but a lot of this is common sense. Yeah. But we want to put everything into perspective, and it's all important. And I think, we just want to start to become more familiar with what we're looking at, and really making sure that we're giving ourselves the best opportunity for success.
I love this. So again, our topic today is enjoying food with diabetes, understanding food labels. Sarah, what should a healthy grocery basket for someone with diabetes contain?
So this, I thought it's a really great conversation we can segue out with, because people often ask me, what's in a healthy grocery basket, or we've had some great grocery companies and working with us and through the pandemic trying to put together, a grocery basket that somebody might find healthy. And of course, everybody's individual tastes and your cultural and what we eat is different. But I want to say one thing. If your grocery basket that you have put together by the time you come back to the checkout till has more things in it that don't have a label on it, you're winning. So if your grocery basket is 3/4 full of things that don't have a label, an apple, an avocado, some eggs, and nuts, and they don't have labels on them, that we're winning, because those are going back to whole foods, to real foods. And if the majority of our diet is real foods, then we know that they all have, it's a piece of fish, it's a this, it's a doesn't have a label on it, then we're winning. Of course, we're going to get into the aisles and we're going to choose perhaps a package of oatmeal, or we're going to buy a loaf of bread, or we're going to get some products or some crackers. We might want to choose some soups for a rainy day, although homemade soups you can't beat. But I really want to emphasize to people that let's go back also to making sure that we're predominantly focusing, when I'm talking about prevention of kidney disease, prevention of heart disease with someone with diabetes, we want to go back to whole foods, real foods, fresh foods. We can't go wrong going back to that healthy plate, where half of that plate, fresh or frozen. I'm not going to also say that for people where we look at the cost sometimes of particularly of fresh produce, but a bag of frozen cauliflower, a bag of frozen broccoli, a bag of frozen mixed vegetables is okay, because we're not losing any of the nutrient content there. And that does have a label on it. So if we're looking for foods that are going to provide us with a good amount of non-starchy carbohydrates, that's going to be our vegetables, fresh or frozen. If we've got some healthy grains in that basket, if we've got a package of quinoa, a box of quinoa, we've got maybe a box of fresh, of old-fashioned oats. We've got things which have a good amount of whole grain, good amount of fiber in them. We're choosing snacks, if we do want them, with a cracker that's highest in fiber, and we're choosing healthy fats, avocados, we've got eggs, we've got healthy protein sources. We're winning if the most of that grocery basket has items that don't have a label on it.
I love how you just sort of summarized and demystified how people can improve their overall eating health habits, making healthy choices with and without labels. That's so critical.
Exactly. We're all going to come across a time that you want to take something home, and making the best decision. Perimeter shopping is easy, and going to our garden markets, but label reading is a valuable skill. And it's going to help you to make important choices, which will have huge impact on your health. And sometimes we choose foods, as I've said to many people who have come and had sessions with me, we eat for more reasons than to nourish our body. And sometimes we just put in a box in the grocery basket because we feel like it. And that's okay too. Yeah. But for 80% of the time, the rest of the time, when you are making choices for you or for your family, we want to make sure that you understand and that you've taken a lot of the misunderstanding, the myths and the perplexity out of that label, and really honing in on the things that are relevant and helping you to make the best choices.
Fantastic. So I'd like to thank Sarah for coming to talk about enjoying food with diabetes, understanding food labels. And I extend a huge thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. Keep an eye on this spot for the next episode of Health-Abets. Leave any comments or feedback on the Department of Health YouTube page, and follow us on Facebook at Department of Health. Stay healthy, Bermuda.
You have been listening to Bermuda Health-Abets. Please note, anything you heard on this podcast is not a substitute for visiting your healthcare provider. If you have a topic or want a question answered, please contact the Health Promotion and Wellness Office of the Department of Health by emailing healthpromotion@gov.bm or by calling 278-4900. Be sure to listen out for the next episode of Bermuda Health-Abets.